You. So it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, David DJ Johnson. He goes by DJ. He is currently, has a new position. He is the Vice President of Membership and Volunteer Engagement at AWON, the Association of Women's, not even on here.
Yeah, it's Women's Health, Obstetrics, and Neonatal Nursing. So basically, it's an association that focuses on nurses that support women while they're going through the pregnancy, labor, or delivery process, and then newborns.
So he has extensive experience in associations. He worked with an association for diabetes educators. He worked at the American Society of Association Executives. And most recently, he was a vice president at the American Society of Interior Designers. I met DJ through ASAE's, the American Society of Association Executives, Diversity Executive Leadership Program, known as DELP. And he and I are in the same cohort of aspiring executive leaders who are recognized by our peers and brought into this group for opportunities for networking and building relationships. He is an amazing person, very well connected in associations and best practices. And, you know, when I grow up, I want to know as much as he does about association practices. He has his CAE, his Certified Association Executive Credential, and he has the IOM, which is another credential that actually many camp staff have. I believe Ron has it, and Eileen has it, and Nancy Milazzo here. So he is going to talk today about leadership pipeline for this talk, and then he's going to talk at breakout sessions. He's going to talk about member engagement and member experience. So without further ado, DJ Johnson.
All right. All right, thank you. So first off, just want to make sure everyone can hear me. All right, sounds like it. So I am so excited to be here today engaging with you guys, specifically to talk about building your leadership pipeline in order to help your chapters achieve success, and then also to help CAMPT achieve its larger mission. So as we go through this, I'm going to be sharing some data, I'm going to be sharing some experiences and some insights, but then also, since this is a leadership conference, I'm going to be asking you all to reflect on what brought you here today and what made you a leader. Now, before we start to talk really about recruiting new leaders, I think it's really important to kind of go back and think, what is it exactly that a leader does? So a leader is someone who motivates others to act towards achieving a common goal. So a leader is someone that motivates others to act towards achieving a common goal. And one of the things that I think that it's really important about leadership is to think about the fact that even though some people say that there are some leaders that are born and some leaders are made, I don't really think that's true. Leadership is deliberate. It is intentional. Sometimes you might be thrown in situations that you didn't really plan to have to navigate, but how you respond and what you do, that ends up being a choice. So I always like to get just kind of like a general sense for those of you that are in the room, kind of what your leadership path and what your leadership journey was. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and when I ask you those questions, just if that represents you, I want you to raise your hand. So first question, I want you to think back before you had ever become an actual member of CAMPT. So this is before you've joined. How many of you, when you joined, one of the first things that you thought, or maybe one of the reasons why you joined, is because you wanted to be a leader in the organization? Okay, so we have a lot of people that were just waiting to jump into leadership, that wanted to get in and they saw something in the organization. So, okay, so second question. So for how many of you who maybe once you had gotten to know a little bit about the organization after you joined, you took the initiative yourself? So before someone ever asked you, you decided, okay, I'm gonna wait, and if I see something, I'm gonna volunteer. So how many of you volunteered before someone asked you? Okay, so we've got about like another third of the room. And so then I'm curious for the remainder of you, I'm assuming. So who was it who maybe you had joined and then someone else saw something in you, or maybe they voluntold you because there wasn't anyone else maybe to do it that you're going to do it. So okay, so that's the other third of the room. Now, I've worked across, as Nabil mentioned, I'm on my 6th association now, over almost 20 years. And it's so interesting hearing a lot of the things that you guys are talking about. And first off, thinking about that finance session, that was one of the most fun, engaging finance sessions that I have ever seen done for chapter leaders in like my 17 years. So, I want to say kudos to the staff, like on that. But a lot of the things that you guys may be struggling with in your chapters are not unique. They're the same things that either maybe many of your chapters are struggling with, and also that other organizations are struggling with, especially around recruiting volunteers. So I want you to imagine a future. So just take a minute and imagine. Imagine that as if you were going through the year, anytime you needed a volunteer, you had one. And imagine that you had all the volunteers that you needed and that they all worked well together. And at the end of that, they actually did what it was that they were supposed to do, and they had a positive experience that got them coming back and having more volunteers. So that's really the vision of what we're going to try and talk about today. So, and some of you might be thinking, okay, so who is this guy? And Nabil gave me a very generous, wonderful introduction, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but what I'm going to explain is, other than being an association professional, someone that has been planning these kinds of programs for like almost the last 2 decades, I'm also a lifelong volunteer. I've been volunteering first when going to soup kitchens with my mom's church when I was in elementary school, on up to I currently serve on 2 boards, including the actual commission that administers and governs the Certified Association Executive Exam. For association professionals to kind of learn what it takes to run an association, so that we can make sure to give you all the good guidance so that you can stay within legal liability and be successful. And one of the things that I've always seen, that when it comes to volunteering, we can build off of the positive and even negative experiences that we have had as volunteers. And it's a matter of kind of thinking and being intentional of what can we do to kind of go beyond that. So one of the associations that I worked at, as Nabil mentioned, is the American Society of Association Executives. So basically, that's a nonprofit association for people who run nonprofit associations. So it's the most meta job that I've ever had, but there's an association for everything, as there should be. So while I was there, in 2007, they actually commissioned a study specifically looking at, around volunteering, these challenges that a lot of associations are facing. Basically, they wanted to see what made people volunteer, what made people be successful in their volunteering, and then also what made people come back and continue volunteering. So, a little bit about this study is that they actually had 23 associations that participated in this. And so each of those 23 associations had to submit at least a list of 10,000 members. So they reached out to 230,000 people, I think that would have been. And then out of that, they ended up with the 20,000 responses. So they got about a 10% response rate, which is good. And then they divided, as I kind of have here on the screen, and I'll read it for people that are more in the back, they divided those into 3 categories. They had basically a little over 15,000 people who had said, I volunteered in the last year. And that may have been with their association, or that might have been with some outside organization. All that mattered was the study wanted to see, are you currently volunteering? Then they looked at another 3,000 people who had volunteered in the past, most likely for their association, where they said, I did volunteer, but I'm just not doing it now, because they wanted to delve into, well, why? Why aren't you? And then there was another about 1,500 people out of that sample who said, I have never volunteered for my association, Who knows, maybe I will, but I'm not really planning to, and to delve into those reasons why. And so, and really, due to the large sample size of 20,000 people, there's some great insights that are still true today that I'm hoping will help you all as you think about what you can be doing to recruit volunteers. Now, but since this is a leadership conference, and also in the vein of what you guys just did through your finance session, I also wanted to add a little fun into this. So I'm going to volunteer 2 chapters that I need to bring probably 4 volunteers forward. So can we get the East Bay chapter and the Ventura County chapter to please come forward? East Bay and Ventura. And I need you to bring 3. There need to be 4 of you, at least 3, but 4 hopefully. Yes, just come forward, please. All right, this is leadership. Intentional action. All right, wonderful. So from your chapters, first off, I need you to choose one person. So just choose one person to start off with in the beginning. All right, so, and I need those one people to come stand over here by this table. Yeah, volunteer someone. All right, so stand right there by that purple, yes, and then you're gonna stand right there. So are you guys feeling a little anxious? Yep. Feeling a little scared? Wondering what this might be? Well, since we're here in Anaheim, which is only 2 cities over from Burbank, which I call the city of dreams, because that's where so many people go to accomplish their dreams of. And do we have anyone here from Burbank? All right, shout out to the one person from Burbank, yes. So, because as you all might know, especially from the last session, that Burbank is the US capital of game shows. So, we're gonna play a little game called Family Feud, Camp Edition. All right, and so, hopefully, you all know how to play Family Feud? Actually, let me go back. So, here, give me a second. All right, I'll turn it back on in a second. So, just for those of you who haven't played Family Feud before, Family Feud is where people have been surveyed, and then 2 teams have to guess what the responses were to that survey. And if you can guess the number, like a response where more people gave that response, you get more points. And so what we're gonna do for the face-off section here is, so you guys see those purple buzzers in front of you. So I'm going to show you guys a question, and then when we go into the question, let me see if I can get rid of that. All right, great. So I'm gonna show you guys a question. And so when you see the question, if you think you know the answer, you wanna buzz first, and then that person will get to answer first, and we'll see how you score on the board. And then the other person then gets the answer too. And depending on who got the higher scoring answer, then your team will spend time trying to guess the rest of the things, okay? All right, so we're gonna go to the question. All right, so going to the question. So this first question is, what are typical projects or activities volunteers work on at their associations? All right, buzzer, all right, so what's your answer?
Events.
All right, so, and actually, to prepare myself a little bit better, so we want to see, does the survey say that are people volunteering on things like events? Survey says yes. All right, that's good, 15. All right, so now you still get a chance to steal. So thinking about that question again, what are activities that volunteers typically engage in at their association?
Fundraising?
All right, so I want to see, is there fundraising? Yes, all right. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to go with your chapter, Jason, first to try and answer the other things that are on the board that people typically do, activities that they typically do when they're volunteering. And you can take the mic just right off the stand, either one, yes, and so that way, so let's go to the next person. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Heather Brostrand. There are raffle tickets for sale in the back.
I love that plug.
Oh, right here in the front. See there. Oh.
Hi, everyone. My
Oh,
name-
you know, and there was a good question. So this question was, is this for all associations or camp? This is all associations in general, because it relates to information from the study that I'm talking about. So try and think, but it probably relates. Just think more in general terms instead of specific. All right, so with that, Heather, did you have what do you think is something that are activities that people engage in through associations?
Hey, guys, what do you think?
Membership drives.
Membership drives. And the answer is yes. How many points? All right,
You got a
thank you.
car? Did you bring a car with you? Minivan for
You know
our
what?
chapter?
So I might have the mustache of Steve Harvey, but I don't have the money of Steve Harvey. So, but we could talk about it later. So going on to the next person, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tu Huang, also from the East Bay Camp chapter.
Sure. What kinds of activities do people do when they volunteer at associations in general? What kinds of activities or things are they doing when they volunteer?
What is board? That's Jeopardy.
Yeah. No, you can just say the answer. Yeah, you can just say the answer. Yeah, good.
Board meetings.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, so going on to the next person.
Hi, I'm Beth Hermosillo, also East Bay Camp chapter. Administrative duties.
Administrative duties, so, all right, yeah. I mean, that is a part of volunteering, but that might not be an exact thing that they're doing. So we're taking it back to Jason. So Jason, what are other things so when people are giving of their time, what are other things that they might be doing? How might they be supporting the organization or supporting its members?
Volunteering for the board?
That one's already said.
Oh.
Let's see. I'll give you. So, what is something that Nabil spent a lot of time talking about this morning to get you guys engaged in that affects policy?
Advocacy?
All right, great. Yes. And I'll tell you. And so, since you guys have already gone through the full round, I'll just go through the some of the other ones. So, when it comes before we go to the other team. So sometimes you have people engaged in setting standards for the organization. You may also have people that are writing and presenting. And then also, believe it or not, one of the top things that people say why they want to volunteer and give back is they want to mentor with an organization. So, all right, so let's go ahead and pass the mic on to the other. And so, yeah, no, those were great answers. So, and I think you guys ended up getting, it was like 4 out of the 6. And so, and I'll be calculating that as I'm standing here. So let's go to the next question.
We're doing it.
All right, so next question.
Okay.
And so this one, it might be a little bit more difficult. So why don't members volunteer? So what are some of the excuses or reasons that people give for not volunteering?
Too busy, not enough time.
All right, so I want to see, does the survey say, whoa. Sorry. Yes, no, does the survey say too busy, not enough time? Yeah. Oh, it does. It does indeed. Here we go. All right, technology is great when it works. Yeah, no, it really is. They make it look so easy. So yes, now we're back. So yes, great answer. Yes, limited time. All right. So what are other excuses or reasons why people say I didn't volunteer?
Family commitments.
Family commitments. I would put that under limited time as well. So maybe can you think of?
Limited time. Does working, having a job?
Yeah, still more with time. What are other things like, so when you've approached someone and said, I really want you to volunteer, if they're not saying, or if you say, well, why aren't you volunteering for the chapter? What are some things that people might say to you?
I'm going to say anxiety about not being able to do the job.
Okay, you know what? That's a good answer. That is a good answer. And so I will put that one under that they don't really know what it takes and what they need to do around the volunteering. So good answer, good answer, good answer. All right. What are maybe some other excuses? And someone might say, you know, I'd really like to, but...
They don't feel welcomed.
Oh, okay. And yeah, they might not feel...
No.
They might not feel included, so they might not feel included, so they might not feel asked. All right, so what is some other reason why they might not volunteer?
I know, but isn't not interested? Like, is that the
You know, and it's, sometimes people might say, oh, well, I'm volunteering elsewhere, that's where I'm giving my time, maybe at my kid's school, or I'm volunteering on some other larger thing.
Right.
And then, you know, and then I will jump to, and then the last one sometimes is, which relates to time, is when people say, I can't do it in person, or I can't be there. And so, all right, I want everyone to give our teams 2 rounds of applause. All right, so, and for participating, I want to give your chapter first a copy of Family Feud After Hours. So the questions might be a little more racy on there. I noticed one of the questions was name where people typically go to vacation for their honeymoon, but then there's another question of name where people typically go to vacation after the divorce. So, and then I'm also gonna give you guys a copy of Taboo. Hopefully you guys can play it, and I really appreciate you guys playing too, so you're also gonna get, so let's give them a warm round of applause. Thank you. Oh wait, thank you, all right. And we're going to talk about some of those things, you know, a little bit more in depth. But as we get into the insights from decision to volunteer, one of the things that I want to point out is, like with any study, often when you get insights, there are a lot of things that really seem like common sense. You know, whenever you hear them, you think, oh, that sounds pretty simple. But I think that it's always, something that I always tell leaders is the fact that simple doesn't always mean easy. I really enjoyed talking with Jan last night, and I noticed that Jan was walking around carrying one of these, which I always do everywhere I go, because how many ounces are we all supposed to have each day? Yes, like 6 to 8. But how many of us actually do that? All right, so we've got a handful of like good, healthy people that focus on wellness. But the reason is we know this. It is simple information that we know, but we don't make a plan. We don't actually do the things that we need to do to take the action to make it happen. So as I go through some of these insights from the study about what does it take to make people volunteer, remember, some of it's going to sound simple, but the question for you all as leaders is, how are you going to implement this? How are you going to actually make it happen? So, you know, people volunteer for a lot of different reasons and values, and reasons related to what they're going to get out of the experience, and reasons related to how they are going to be utilized. So one of the main questions that Decision to Volunteer asked for people who had never started volunteering, and I'll read this for people in the back, are, you know, I would start volunteering now if, and it relates to some of the things that we just talked about in that game. Most people said, if I knew that it was a meaningful opportunity, if it was something that meant something and that resonated with me, I would start volunteering today. And then others would say, well, if I knew that I had something really valuable that I could do for the organization, that you're saying that I would be well utilized, that I would be there. And then some of the other things on here about having accessible location, interest in volunteering, that especially if they're a sole practitioner, that they're not going to lose money while they're, you know, these are things that are kind of out of your control as a chapter. But some of the other things about having short-term assignments, getting them the info when they need it, doing good training, which kind of relates back to the skills, you know, it all kind of goes hand in hand. And so I really want to key in on the first two, on what does it mean, how do you get someone to respond to what your chapters are doing and feel that it's meaningful, so that all of those other concerns, I don't have enough time, I'm giving to these other organizations that I feel are using me well and that are meaningful, that are going to really connect with them. And when it comes to creating a meaningful opportunity, we're really going to have to kind of focus on both the head and the heart, which I'm sure that's something that you all as therapists have to do all the time. You're having to deal with that kind of like push-pull of both the emotions, but then also kind of getting through, to the rational mind. So, and when it comes to thinking about the reasons why people volunteer, I think it's pretty self-explanatory that those who are more altruistic are that they want to know that they're having a positive benefit. And that might be because they just want to change the world and leave it better than they found it. It might be because they appreciate and support the profession that you are in, or they want to give back to the people who helped them, kind of get where they are today. And I think that both reasons are valid, whether it is altruistic or whether it's more self-focused, because there are a number of us who we've found better jobs, we've improved our skills, we've learned more about, and been more successful in our personal and professional lives because of volunteering and getting engaged. So thinking of a way to kind of tie into both of those things is what you really want to do when you're thinking about kind of like your elevator speech. So I'm going to have you all do an exercise kind of individually and then talk about it at your tables. And so I'm trying to think of a good way to divide this. So since you guys are on crescent rounds, whoever is to your far left, just right now, consider yourself an A, and then the next person, consider yourself a B. Okay, so A, B, A, B, A, B, and so on. What I want you to do is to just take 2 minutes where I want, starting with the person that's the farthest on your left, on your crescent round, that's an A, so A, B, A, B, A. So if you're an A, I want you to write a 2-minute elevator pitch. So this is where you want to think about things that your chapter does or reasons why people might get involved. And I want you to think about writing a speech just if you were talking to someone where you're coming from the heart. And remember, elevator speeches, this should be something that you can really say in like 2 minutes or a minute. So, enough time for someone to go from the first floor to the 6th floor and you run into them. Oh, hey, it's so great to see you. We're looking for volunteers at camp, and I want to tell you a little bit about, so think about the heart side. So this relates to what's going to appeal to their values or what's going to appeal to the positive benefit that that this program has on someone to be engaged. Now, and for those of you who are the Bs that are focusing on the brain, I want you to think about how can you describe maybe an activity that someone can do that's going to improve someone personally, that's going to have a personal benefit for them that isn't necessarily just appealing to the values. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to kind of write something down, and then I'll tell you what to do next. So, and I'm going to literally set the timer on my phone just to make sure that we stay on time. And so I'll give you 2 minutes. Yes. No. Just right now, just write it individually. Just write it for yourself individually, and then you'll find out why I divided you up the way that I did. Right. So yeah. So just focus on this for right now. Just come up with your kind of elevator speech about recruiting someone as a volunteer. You've run into someone at the elevator, and you know that this is a person that either they seem someone that really you can appeal to their heart, or maybe it's someone where you know that they're looking for something personally, depending on whether you're A or B. And so just think about how you would make that speech. All right. So we're at time. So now what I'd like for you to do is just go ahead and share what you wrote with a partner. But in this case now, I'm hoping that the A's are talking to a B. So you're talking right next to each other. So one of you is going to be sharing what was a more emotional kind of appeal, and one of you will be sharing what is a more kind of cerebral appeal. Right. All right, so if I can get everyone's attention back up again. All right, so I hear a lot of great conversations going on. So just whoever's talking, just kind of wrap up your thoughts. All right, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. All right, great. Can you tell that I have a 4-year-old? All right, so hopefully you guys were having a lot of good discussion and also insights, kind of seeing what it was like hearing people kind of responding from more of like an emotional place, but then also kind of more of a kind of self-serving place. So I want to ask, does anyone think that, and maybe think about what your partner said to you, does anyone, for the heart side of things, who thinks that maybe they had a really good appeal or a really good speech? All right, so I saw one over here. All right, so saw you first. Yes.
So I'm coming from a strength-based perspective. So first, I would ask them about their current accomplishments, such as like, how did you get your degree, and what are you doing in your career?
All right, okay, but I want to hear the speech.
Oh.
What did you actually say? So what did you, so we're standing together in the elevator.
Okay.
So I walk in, and actually, if you don't mind, maybe come up here. So,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
So elevator door opens, you come in, and I say, oh, good to see you, Margot.
Good to see you, DJ. How are you?
Oh, doing well.
What are you doing?
Oh, you know, just going up to work Mondays.
Oh, what do you do?
Well, you know, I just passed clinical, You know, I just passed the exam, so I'm
Congratulations.
super excited by that.
Absolutely. And so that's a huge accomplishment. Oh, that's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you, thank
It's
you.
so hard, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm almost to my floor.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
almost.
So what sorts of things are you doing at work that you really like?
Oh well, you know, I want to get to the point of being a supervisor.
Great.
And I'm also trying to, you know, really just kind of broaden my specialties in some ways.
So you're really looking to mentor, to help, to assist other people?
Sure. Yeah. You know, a lot of people have helped me, and so yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
really interested in helping. It's hard to find the
Great.
time.
So, you know, you can also volunteer for our organization, the American
Oh.
Family Association.
Okay, I haven't heard much
And-
about it.
Wow. Okay, and it'll only, you know, what you're doing, preparing yourself as a supervisor, is about a lot less time if you volunteer for the organization and help other young therapists meet their goals. So
Oh
just-
wow. Well, you know, here, why don't I give you my card, and then why don't you give me a call? I'm interested in hearing some more
Yeah,
about that. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you. So let's give Margot a round of applause. And I like the music. Something has taken over my computer, and for that, a Starbucks gift card. So thank you for volunteering. All right. So we had someone that had volunteered from the heart side. Can we get a volunteer more from the other side? All right. So come up here. We're gonna do the same thing. Do the same thing. All right. So this time, Jan, since I know you know the drill, I'm only going 4 floors.
Oh, I'm going one floor.
I'm going, okay, all right. So,
Hey, DJ,
hey, Jan, good to see you.
Congratulations on just getting licensed.
Oh, thank you. You heard about that.
I did. So CAMF chapter volunteers learn more about the association and allows you to develop your leadership skills and gain personal satisfaction. You'll be able to be on the cutting edge of the future of CAMF in California and MFTs.
Wow, I've always wanted to be a leader, and it sounds like that would help me personally. And
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so can you send me an email sometime, and can we talk about it?
Sure. Give me
All
your
right.
card.
Do you, so I'm giving
My
you a card? Yes, and so, and for that, thank you. That's a $15 AMC movie gift
Great,
card.
thank
So
you.
thank you. Thank you for that. All right. Okay. And so, but, you know, really the important thing. All right. You guys are a great audience. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, you know, the most important thing about that is you really want to have both in your back pocket, because some people do have just that natural response towards volunteering and giving, as a number of you who raised your hands when I asked the question of, were you looking to be leaders before you even joined the organization? And then there were other people who they had to be asked, or there might have been reasons why someone decided to get involved. So thinking about, you know, kind of like those two sides of things. Now, the other thing that we had kind of talked about in the game was about why don't people start volunteering? The biggest, which we'll get into in just a minute, really relates to a lack of information. You know, not having a good understanding about what it takes to volunteer, what are the skills, how that it works, when is it that people get involved, what are the kinds of projects that you work on. But a large part of it that the study really found was that a lot of people don't volunteer simply because it's not just that they don't think that they have the skills, it's that no one has ever asked them. And one of the great things about you all in your chapters that the study also showed is that some of the most common methods for people to get recruited is from their chapters. You have the personal relationships and you're visible. You're more visible in some ways than Nabil and his staff are, because not everyone is necessarily coming to the large programs that the parent organization puts on. So the organization is depending on you to be the face of CAMF and bringing people in. And so, I mean, and once again, it seems very simple and a no-brainer that being invited through chapter communications, being recruited at a meeting, or getting that personal ask. But the hard part about this, about the simpleness of this, is how are you incorporating that into everything that you're doing? I've noticed that at a lot of associations that I've worked at, like there's normally like an annual call for volunteers, or there's the nomination process, and that's when volunteers start thinking about, oh, who have we seen, who do we know? And they start, in some cases, either just trying to remember or maybe going through list. Here's the thing that I'll say is like, it's very similar to gardening. It's like if you wait until it's tomato season to say that you want tomatoes, that's not the time to start growing the tomatoes. You're not going to get tomatoes then. So the question is, what can you do continuously throughout at every event, or maybe in every communication? Not that you have to browbeat people over the head with it, but just in a way that lets people know we're always looking for volunteers, we always have these opportunities, but then what are you doing, either whether that is as board members, as committee members, to keep track and keep a process so that by the time that call for nominations happens, you have so many names to be thinking of and that you have already built those relationships with, instead of, because you've done the care, feeding, and gardening of your garden by the time that you need to harvest, instead of waiting and saying, oh, winter's coming, and we don't really have anyone to kind of fill these things. So I know winter, it is coming in 2 months, we're almost there. Game of Thrones. Anyway, so, but now focusing in on that second thing about, so how do you communicate to people and get them matched up to have the right skills? Because, and it's funny, I always like to make this joke. So, which do you think is better, or which do you think is worse? Is it better to have someone who maybe that you find someone and you're like, oh, they have the skills, but they really don't care about CAMPT or our mission. They're not really passionate about it, but I know they could do websites. Or is it better sometimes to find someone who's really, really passionate, loves, kind of like the mission of CAMPT, but like they don't even know what the difference between, like, I don't know, HTML and an apple. But the thing that I always make the joke about that is if you get someone that is really passionate, but then doesn't have the skills to act, you put them in the wrong job. This is what you're going to end up with. And that's not the outcome that you're looking for when you find that passionate volunteer. But I mean, really, you do want to have both. I mean, you can take someone who is passionate, and if you can align their skills, train them, you can get them there. Hopefully also, if you find someone with the skills, you may have to, and they don't have the passion, you might have to have that elevator speech of, look, I know you don't know a lot about CAMPT, or maybe you haven't felt really connected, and maybe that heart kind of appeal isn't going to work on them, so you're gonna have to go for the head. Like, I know you're good at websites, you're an excellent therapist, and I can see that you're not getting the kind of recognition, and a lot of people in the industry don't know you. And have you thought by getting involved, you're gonna increase your profile, which is it's just a matter of, you have to learn how to pivot, how to switch. Because I know we all get used to, we know what brought us into the organization, so we're really good at telling our own stories, but it's about learning when to tell your story, and maybe when to either switch and tell someone else's story, which is something that I'll talk a little bit more about for anyone that comes in to the membership session. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail about this part, other than to say, out of all the volunteers that were identified through the decision to volunteer, they basically found that people fall into kind of 4 categories of the reasons or the kinds of things that they do as volunteers. So the majority of people, when we say mentors, these are people that really just like supporting others, like giving guidance. So that could be, giving them a job at an event, which is just, I need you to make sure that as we have emerging professionals or people that are just new faces, can you go and support them and find more about them and make them feel welcome? It's just it's a different way of kind of thinking about how you divide up your volunteer activities. Subject matter experts, that should be pretty self-explanatory. These are people that have a deeper knowledge or information. They like to speak, they like to write, they like to help maybe educate people on policy or whatever that might be. And it's a different kind of skill set, and normally they're more kind of short-term, time limited. I'll come and I'll share my ideas, but I'm not gonna sit on a committee for 12 months and kind of thinking about how that works. Local leaders, like those are yourself, these are people who you're interested in having an impact, creating influence, connecting, and bringing people together. But those are people that are normally more interested in those long-term opportunities because you're looking to hopefully get some visibility in your areas where you are, as well as having that personal impact. And then shapers, like people that are sitting on the camp board, the parent organization, are kind of super volunteers that are super committed and that are doing everything. So one of the things that I always encourage volunteer leaders to do is, as you look at all of the events and all the volunteer opportunities that you offer throughout the year, is just try and go back to this and try and think like, okay, how are we engaging people at these events that just like supporting others? Am I using them as greeters? Am I using them to maybe make follow-up to people after they've left to see what it was like and keep them engaged in the organization? Do we have experts that are coming in that we haven't really, used their expertise? Kind of finding different ways to kind of bucket this will help you create more opportunities that might appeal to more different kinds of people. And so, and I want to give a big shout out to how many chapters out there actually do like orientations or retreats for their leaders or volunteers. So yeah, so at least half of the people in the room, and I saw that those, as I was reading about the chapter award winners from last year, I saw that that was a really successful practice, because you want to make sure that your volunteers are aligned with what you need them to do, so they're not sitting on the branch and actually sawing it off, and that then you're going to have to go and fix what they didn't do correctly. So if you're not doing volunteer job descriptions, even if they're just simple bullet points, that's really something that is important to do. I was talking to a chapter leader yesterday who she talked about when she was president, she had created, kind of binders related to each position, and about how that really helped the group work well together. And then as time went on, sometimes that process is left by the wayside. I think, creating those kinds of operations that I really love how Nabil described it as scaffolding, something that creates a structure that builds people up. I don't think anyone ever volunteers to specifically sabotage or torpedo what it is that the organization is doing. It's just that sometimes we're not giving them the right support. So when it comes to volunteer job descriptions, if you're going back and looking at those, we normally put in the main function, purpose, and in some cases the skills. I also think it's worth saying, what is the time commitment? And in some cases, I even simplify that as, is it in terms of a lift, in terms of time, is that light, medium, or heavy? So is this something that for someone who's looking to pass the exam or maybe has taken on more of an increased caseload that doesn't have a lot of time, that where they can look at it and say, okay, I really need something that's more light, that's ad hoc? Or is this someone that's like, I'm looking for something deeper, I feel like I have the energy and the time commitment, I'm willing to take on doing something heavy? And adding those can really help your volunteers, kind of make those kinds of decisions. I also think that sometimes we get used to going back to the same people every time. Like we know this person is really good at motivating people to fundraise, or this is like our policy guru. And for those volunteers, it can start to feel like a life sentence. Like, I agreed to do it the last 5 times. Are you really going to ask me the 6th and 7th? Do you have anyone else? So like sometimes utilizing those volunteers by saying, you know what, you've been great at this. Do you know other people? Like, who do you think, who have you noticed, or maybe even who could you mentor on this event so that we can just, stop asking you every single time? And sometimes we just get so used to thinking about people with what they're doing. We don't think about how they can help us find someone else to do what they're doing. And then the other thing that I kind of put in bold on there is about posting these descriptions year round so that you can make sure that you never know when there might be someone that the light bulb goes off when they have this great experience where they might think, I want to do more. And then if you only are having your call for volunteers like once a year or every 3 months, and maybe you've missed that person and they've kind of moved on and you've missed on that opportunity. And so sometimes in some chapter newsletters, I even encourage putting the line that says, we're always looking for volunteers. If ever you're interested, please email, whoever it is. And it's just something you leave on there. You don't have to change it, or update it. And then if that person who's really, wants to take the initiative, you won't end up missing out on them. And then also when it comes to thinking about like the garden and like the different seeds that you want to plant in order to get like a really healthy garden, I always kind of try to make sure that when I'm looking at my volunteers, I have people that kind of fall in 3 areas. I do want people that have been engaged with the organization, that know a lot about how we've done things, people that if you put them in front of Finance Jeopardy, they would be able to answer most of the $500 questions. But then also at the same time, it's important to get people who haven't been engaged in the organization, because there may be perspectives that they have or reasons where they can appeal to others like them, and they help bring in that fresh perspective. Now, the thing that I'll say is, like, I will often see, sometimes when you get people who don't know much about the organization engaged with people who know a lot about the organization, you do end up with a lot of tension, because it can feel like there's a lot of, I'm trying to educate you who's never been here why we do the things that we do. And the new person's saying, I'm trying to explain to you why, as a new person, none of that stuff really matters to me. But recognizing that both of those opinions are valid. Like, if you can find a way as a board to address both of those things, you will come to stronger decisions even through that tension and conflict. And then the other thing that I'll say is, like, you have many different practice settings, you have many different career stages. There are lots of different ways to recognize diversity. And so when you're sitting in your boardroom or when you're looking at your volunteers, I think it's just as important sometimes to think about not who's in the room, but who is not in the room. And then to think about what is it that you can do to try to be more open and inclusive. Now, you know, I've given that particular statement or speech many times, and one time I was at an association where I actually witnessed a chapter leader walk up to someone that looked very similar to me and said, hey, you know, DJ, we really need you on the board. You should be on the board. And the person said the typical, you know, I don't have a lot of time. I'm working on a lot of stuff. And he said, well, you know, National told me we need more people of color on the board, and you're the only person here, so don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I'm sure as therapists, you would never say that. But I appreciated the fact that this leader was thinking, okay, I am thinking about who's not in the room. I'm doing something active. But the mistake that they made is they immediately in that conversation almost made it seem like, well, the primary value here, the only thing that you're bringing in is the fact that you're different than what we have here. As opposed to, I was like, that person has been engaged and been at almost every single event, and they have shown an ability to talk about the organization. Why didn't you lead with that? You know, that's the conversation about trying to increase diversity. That could have been the 3rd or 4th conversation. Like, it's still valid to acknowledge, but don't automatically approach them, you know, kind of with that. And so, you know, with that, I really am emphasizing this thought of both continuous recruitment, figuring out a way that you can create a culture of encouraging, you know, and being inclusive in terms of finding volunteers, but then also what goes hand in hand with that is making sure that you're creating a positive volunteer experience. Because remember, even when you're having to deal with conflict or dealing with situations that you might not have planned to have to face, when you rose your hand and said, I want to take on the mantle of leadership, how you approach those things, other people who are at the committee level and that are just coming in are watching. And if they see you navigating and having a positive experience, that makes them more likely. Now, I mean, for all of you that are here today, even for those of you that were the like jump in with 2 feet first leaders, I bet that there have been leaders in your life that as you watched them, you thought, wow, that was inspiring. I can do that for people. I want to do that for others. And I think that sometimes in the mission of trying to meet all of our goals and accomplish the things that we need to, we lose sight of that. You know, we focus more on this needs to be done this way, or we need to fix and deal with this crisis. And while that's important, you still want to act appropriately, quickly during crisis and things like that. You also want to make sure that you're thinking about what can you do to make things more fun. You need to orient your board about finance. Can you play a Jeopardy game so that you're not up at the break of dawn in the morning, you know, talking about articles of incorporation and all these other things, but you're making it fun for them. You're creating, an intentional experience. So, just as you think about acting on the findings, and as you go back and you kind of think about, okay, well, what does this mean as I think about the volunteer pool that I have or that I want? Some of the things that you can think about are, obviously the diversity of the people that you are trying to bring in, the diversity of the opportunities that you offer. Have you looked at and tried to figure out, is every single opportunity that you have a committee where someone needs to be on it for at least like 4 to 5 months? Because there's got to be something in there where it's like an ad hoc, and I'm sure you do have ad hoc opportunities, you just haven't written them out into descriptions. You haven't said, basically at every event, we're gonna need a greeter. And as a greeter, you just have to show up for this event, you need to know enough about this, you need to come to the pre-meeting, and then that's it. I've created something that's short, sweet, someone can do that, that's engaging, and then I'll also put that up with like my other committee opportunities. And that relates to also the flexible options and then also the messaging that you're using. Because this is what relates to, kind of at the end of the study about, so why do volunteers leave? Or why do they decide that they're not coming back to volunteer again? And basically what it relates to is their experience. It might be their experience with, the expectations. Did your chapter follow through on what was promised? Did it end up being kind of more expensive in terms of the time or the travel that they had to do because the job description maybe wasn't written correctly? They thought it was going to be a light lift, but it really was a heavy lift, but we didn't set that expectation in the beginning. And then also, how is your organization navigating tension? How is it navigating kind of like the hierarchy of someone who comes in and says, from the first day, I want to be president. And it's like, okay, maybe you should get from associate to, at first. But how do you help someone navigate that so that you're not kind of squashing their enthusiasm, but helping them understand, kind of the organization? And then are they getting benefits? And then one of the easiest things is recognition. I think I also read some of the things in the awards materials about how many chapters here do some kind of like volunteer recognition or awards kind of activity. Okay, so we've got about a handful. So for those of you who aren't, thinking about what do you do at the end of the year, whether that's an event, whether that if you put out regular communications of doing something where you recognize. So April is Volunteer Recognition Month. If no one's there. So there's a foundation called the Points of Light Foundation. And a lot of big organizations do this, where every April, and you'll see a lot of like Red Cross, United Way, they'll typically just send a message out either to all their volunteers saying thank you. Or in some cases, they'll even list the name of everyone that they know of who's volunteered. But if you're gonna do that, make sure you have every name. Because if you don't, sometimes it's better just to do that general thing or to highlight, like the bigger ones that you know. But finding that recognition piece really is important. Because as chapter leaders, you guys are in kind of control in some ways about what kind of experience your leaders are going to have. Is someone who could be a potential leader going to have a positive experience that makes them coming back, or are they going to have a negative experience? And I'm sure you guys probably talk about the different elements of empowerment to your clients a lot. And I think that when going through that and thinking about how are you empowering your leaders so that you're working together with good expectations to share information, but not micromanaging, and kind of focusing on, even when things don't go well, on learning from that. If you create an environment and a culture of learning, then people won't be as afraid when things don't go according to plan and it's about coming together. One of the favorite videos that I've seen more recently that Nabil had actually posted to our leadership group was about at a basketball game, this player had just missed the shot. And as he was kind of walking away from missing the shot, shoulders slumped, head down, one of his other teammates immediately kind of walked over right next to him. And as he was walking, the teammate just kind of put his chin back up, just as to kind of look, we still got your back. We are still here, even though you missed the shot, chin up. And and that was such a powerful moment. And how are we doing that for our other volunteers, while still trying to help them keep boundaries and so on. So in closing today, I want to leave you with kind of one of my favorite quotes. And I'll read it for people who can't see. It says, "True leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders." So as you're looking to kind of grow your garden and think about the different volunteer experiences that of recruiting them, finding the right skills, and that you're looking to create, I hope that as you're going through your next year, you'll be thinking always kind of in the back of your head, what are you doing to help develop those leaders of tomorrow? Because then I promise you, when your term is over and when you are getting to that point of sitting in the seat of, okay, I have to help find the people that are going to keep things going, you're not going to be scratching your head. The problem that you'll have will be there are so many people that you are thinking of or that you have the relationships with, you won't know really kind of where to start. And that will help make you a recruiting superhero. So thank you. Thank you for giving me the time.